In this lesson, I'll be reviewing how to calculate density, mass, or volume using the density triangle. So remember that density is mass per unit volume. So basically, it's a ratio. It's a proportion made up of how much of something per unit of something else. Mass is the amount of stuff in the object. So remember, we measure mass using grams or kilograms. So kilograms would be the base unit that we would use for mass. And so remember that we use the triple beam balance to measure mass. Volume is the amount of space that an object takes up. So no matter what substance that you have or what object you have, it's going to always take up some kind of space. So remember, we can measure that using volume by liquid displacement, or we can measure volume if it's a cube. So if it's a cube, we measure length times width times height. So there's a couple ways we can measure volume. But here we're looking at how do we calculate the density of something. So if I wanted to calculate the density, I would need to know two things. I would need to know the mass and the volume. So if I'm trying to find the density of a rock that has a mass of 27 grams and a volume of 3 cubic centimeters, then I want to look at what they have given me already. So they already gave me the mass, and they've already given me the volume. So what I can do with this actual particular formula, if I just look at the triangle itself, okay, then what I notice is that I'm solving for density. And so since I'm solving for density, if you notice where density is at the bottom of the triangle and right next to it, you have volume, and on top of volume is mass, then density is going to equal mass divided by volume. And so since we know that we have a mass of 27 grams and a volume of 3 cubic centimeters, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide my mass by my volume, and that gives me 9 grams per cubic centimeter. Now let's take a look at how we would solve for volume instead of solving for mass. So what is the volume of a screw that has a mass of 12 grams and a density of 0.6 grams per cubic centimeter? So I can use the density triangle to find out how I would arrange the equation for finding volume. And so what I would do is I could look at where volume is, what its place is in the density triangle, and then I would look at where mass is and where density is. And so mass is actually on top of density. So that means my formula for volume would be volume equals mass divided by density. And so since our mass is given to us in the equation, so the mass of the screw would be 12 grams per cubic centimeter. Sorry, 12 grams. I misstated that. And the density, which they give us, if you notice that for density, the unit is grams per cubic centimeter. So that would be 0.6 or 0.6 grams per cubic centimeter. Okay, So the next thing I would do is I would solve for it, because remember, this is division. And so 12 grams divided by 0.6 grams per cubic centimeter would be 0.2 cubic centimeters, or 2/10 cubic centimeters. And so how did I come up with that? It's because if you look here, okay, grams is actually going to cancel out. And so I'm left with cubic centimeters as my unit. And so remember that cubic centimeters is what we use when we're trying to solve for the volume of an irregular object. So, a couple things to remember. The density, the formula for density is density equals mass divided by volume. The basic unit for mass is grams. It's what we usually use, and sometimes we use kilograms. And the basic, not the basic unit, but the unit that we use for volume, if we're trying to solve for an irregular object, we'll use cubic centimeters. Or a lot of times we use grams over milliliters. So, but milliliters is what we use for liquid volume. Okay, so just keep that in mind and you'll be fine.